My name is Sister Margaret Mary, and I'm 70 years old, a sister of the Sacred Heart at St. Agnes Convent, nestled in the quiet rolling hills of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. For over 50 years, I've walked these red brick halls, my life, bound to God, to prayer, to the vows I swore when I was a young woman. But there's a secret I've carried since 1975 when I was 22, a secret that broke every vow I made, tore my heart apart, and left a wound that's never healed. These weathered walls, stained by time and whispered prayers, hold my story of love, betrayal, and a regret that's followed me like a shadow for decades. In 2022, I shared this with a journalist from the Philadelphia Inquirer, hoping to unburden my soul before it's too late. Now, in 2023, I've sent my story to Echoes of Real Lives, a channel dedicated to sharing the truths of those whose voices have been silenced, so my confession might live beyond these walls. Listen closely, because this tale will stir your heart, make you question the boundaries of duty and desire, and linger like the toll of a church bell on a still Sunday morning. If it moves you, please share in the comments when you started listening and what kept you here. Your thoughts mean more than you know. I was born in 1953 in Mannheim, Pennsylvania, a small town where the air carried the scent of fresh-baked bread from the diner on Main Street, and neighbors swapped stories over picket fences. My father, Frank Sullivan, was a mechanic at Miller's garage, his hands perpetually stained with grease, his flannel shirts frayed from long hours under car hoods. He was a gruff man, his temper short when bills piled up, but he'd soften. At night, singing Irish folk tunes like Danny Boy, his voice rough but warm, filling our little brick house on Market Street. My mother, Eileen, was a seamstress, her fingers dancing over bolts of fabric, stitching dresses for the town's ladies, though her lungs were weak from a pneumonia that clung to her like a ghost. She died when I was 10, leaving our home hollow. Without her laughter, her soft humming of "Be Thou My Vision" as she worked at her sewing machine. Dad raised me and my younger brother Tommy, alone, his worry lines deepening with each passing year, his hands calloused from work and worry. The church was our anchor. Sunday Mass at St. Richard's, where the organ's notes vibrated through the pews. Lenten fish fries in the parish hall, the smell of fried cod mingling with percolating coffee. Rosaries said by the flicker of vigil candles, their wax dripping like tears onto the kitchen table. When Dad's debts grew, car repairs, medical bills from Mom's illness, Tommy's tuition for St. Pius High School, Father O'Malley, our parish priest, suggested the convent. It wasn't a command, but in our tight-knit Catholic world, it felt like the only path forward. Dad saw it as God's will, a way to honor Mom's memory and secure my salvation. I was a dutiful daughter, eager to ease his burdens, so I agreed, though my heart ached at leaving our home, where Mom's lilac bushes bloomed every spring, their sweet scent carrying memories of her gentle touch. I remember the drive to St. Agnes in our rattling Ford pickup, the engine coughing as we wound past Amish farms, their red barns stark against golden cornfields, the air thick with the smell of hay, manure, and summer's heat. The convent loomed ahead, a red brick fortress with a steepled chapel, its wrought iron fence a barrier between the world and the sacred. When the gate clanged shut behind me, the sound echoed in my chest like the final note of a hymn fading into silence. Life in the convent was a rhythm of bells and silence, as steady as a heartbeat. We rose at 5 a.m., our breath clouding in the chilly dormitories, the wooden floors creaking under our bare feet as we hurried to dress. Our black and white habits were stiff with starch, the veils pinching my scalp like a too-tight headband, their weight a constant reminder of the vows I'd taken: poverty, chastity, obedience. In the chapel, stained glass windows depicted saints, St. Agnes, St. Cecilia, their eyes solemn, their hands folded in eternal prayer, casting rainbows. Over oak pews worn smooth by decades of knees, we knelt on cold hardwood floors, reciting the divine office in English, sprinkled with Latin phrases I memorized without fully understanding. Domine, non sum dignus. Lord, I am not worthy. Mother Superior, Sister Teresa Ann, was a formidable woman in her late 50s, her square jaw set like granite, her gray eyes sharp enough to pierce your soul. Her voice was crisp, like a schoolmarm scolding a tardy student, and she spoke of God's love as a duty, a stern command to be obeyed, not a warmth to be felt. She warned us that human desires, love, anger, joy, were snares set by the devil to pull us from God's path, temptations to be crushed under the weight of prayer. I wanted to believe her, to find peace in surrender, but I was young, my heart restless, buzzing like a radio stuck between stations, catching fragments of a life I'd left behind. Bike rides with Tommy down Main Street, Mom's apple pie cooling on the counter, dreams of teaching children in a one-room schoolhouse, their faces bright with discovery. The other nuns were a tapestry of souls, each carrying their own quiet burdens, their faces etched with stories they never shared. Sister Bernadette, a wiry woman in her 40s, had a sharp tongue and a habit of muttering about Watergate or Nixon's resignation, her voice low as if the news still stung, her eyes glinting with a bitterness she never explained, whispers among. The younger nuns hinted she'd joined after a scandal, a broken engagement, a lover who left her for another. But she guarded her past like a locked diary, her lips pursed when questions arose. Sister Joan, just 19, had a soft Georgia drawl and a smile that lit up the convent's gloom, her freckled face bright despite the heavy habit. But her hazel eyes often drifted to the sky, as if she missed her hometown's peach orchards, the strum of her brother's guitar, the freedom of a life left behind. Sister Agnes, older and dour, kept to herself, her hands always busy knitting scarves for the poor, her needles clicking like a warning to mind your own business, her sighs heavy with unspoken grief. Sister Clare, quiet and mousy, blended into the background, her eyes downcast, her presence like a shadow that moved silently among us. We worked in silence, scrubbing chapel floors until they gleamed like mirrors, the soap's sharp scent stinging our noses, tending the garden's tomatoes, zucchini, and marigolds under the blistering Pennsylvania sun, sweat beading under our veils, sewing altar cloths for local parishes, the needle pricking our fingers, copying hymnals in the dim library where fluorescent bulbs buzzed and flickered, casting long shadows over the pages. At meals we sat in a long refectory, the air heavy with the smell of meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and green beans, the clink of forks and scrape of plates mingling with Sister Teresa's droning voice as she read scripture, Psalms, Proverbs, the letters of Paul. I watched the others, noticing small rebellions. Sister Bernadette sneaking an extra slice of apple pie, her fingers quick as she hid it under her napkin. Sister Joan humming a Carole King tune. "You've got a friend," under her breath, stopping when Sister Teresa's eyes flicked her way. Sister Agnes sighing deeply when she thought no one heard, her needles pausing mid-stitch. Sister Clare slipping a dog-eared novel under her habit, its cover hidden. I wondered what secrets they carried, what dreams they'd buried to wear the veil, what made their hearts ache in the silence of this sacred prison. In the summer of 1975, while sweeping the gravel path near the convent's old stone well, its mossy bricks cool under my fingers, I found something that set my heart racing like a car engine revving. Hidden behind a loose brick tucked into a crevice was a folded note, its edges worn, as if it had been held and read 100 times. I glanced around, my pulse thumping, the garden quiet except for the hum of cicadas, the distant lowing of Amish cows, the rustle of marigolds in the breeze. I slipped the note into my sleeve, the paper crinkling against my skin, a secret I couldn't resist. That night in my cell, a cramped room with a narrow cot, a wooden crucifix nailed to the wall, and a single window framing the starry Lancaster sky, I read it by the glow of a flashlight I'd snuck from the kitchen, its beam trembling. In my hands, the handwriting was shaky, urgent, scrawled in blue ink. "I think of you every night. God forgive me, I can't stop." No names, no clues about who wrote it or for whom. My hands shook as I read it again, the words igniting a spark I didn't dare name, a curiosity, a longing that felt like a sin just to acknowledge, a fire in my chest I couldn't douse. I should have burned it, marched it straight to Sister Teresa's office, confessed my temptation, but I couldn't. I hid it under my mattress, its presence a secret flame, rereading it in the dead of night, wondering who in this silent place could feel such forbidden passion. Was it a nun hiding a love for another sister? A priest passing through? A groundskeeper who mowed the lawns, his silhouette fading into the dusk? The questions consumed me, making the convent's silence feel heavier, like a storm cloud ready to break, the air charged with secrets. I threw myself into my duties, desperate to smother that spark. I scrubbed chapel floors until my knuckles bled, the soap's bite stinging my skin. I prayed until my voice grew hoarse, the rosary beads slipping through my fingers like a lifeline, each Ave Maria a plea for strength. I weeded the garden until my back ached, the sun burning my neck through the veil, the dirt caking under my nails. But the note haunted me, its words echoing in my mind like a forbidden song, a melody I couldn't shake. I started noticing more. Whispers cut short when I entered the refectory, the clatter of spoons pausing mid-bite, glances I couldn't read, eyes darting away when I looked back, a door closing softly as I approached the laundry. Sister Joan caught my eye during Compline one evening, her smile fleeting but warm, like a ray of sunlight through the chapel's stained glass. When I tried to ask her about it later, in the garden as we pulled weeds, the earth soft under our knees, she blushed, her freckles standing out against her pale skin, and hurried away, her habit swishing against the gravel, leaving me with more questions than answers. Sister Bernadette watched me too closely, her sharp eyes narrowing when I lingered near the well, her footsteps crunching behind me like a warning, her presence a constant shadow. The convent felt like a puzzle, its pieces hidden in the shadows of its brick walls, and I was caught in its web, unsure who was pulling the strings, who held the power to unravel my life. That fall, he arrived, and the world shifted beneath my feet. Father Daniel Callahan, a young priest from Philadelphia, was sent to hear our confessions and assist with masses at St. Agnes. He was 27, with sandy blonde hair that curled at the edges, green eyes that held a quiet intensity, and a sadness that made him seem older, like he carried a weight no one could see, a burden etched into the lines of his face. His sermons were different from Father O'Malley's fire and brimstone rants about hell and damnation, delivered with a fist pounding the pulpit. Daniel spoke of God's love as something alive, like the Delaware River flowing through his childhood city, its current strong and steady, something you could feel in your bones, not just read in a Bible. His voice was warm, like a folk singer's, Bob Dylan or Paul Simon maybe, with that same raw, honest pull, and I found myself listening not to the words, but to the way they made me feel, seen, understood, alive in a way I hadn't been since I was a girl racing, bikes with Tommy, the wind in my hair, the world wide open. I wasn't the only one drawn to him. Sister Joan lingered after Mass, asking questions about the Book of Psalms, her cheeks pink as she tucked a stray curl under her veil, her Georgia drawl soft and eager. Even Sister Bernadette, with her sharp edges and muttered complaints about hippie priests, softened when he spoke, though she'd scoff and purse her lips if you pointed it out, her eyes darting away like she'd been caught. I was assigned to clean the sacristy, a small room behind the altar that smelled of incense, candle wax, and polished oak. Its shelves lined with silver chalices, brass candlesticks, and folded vestments, the air heavy with the scent of frankincense, the walls absorbing every whisper like a confessional. It was there, on a crisp October afternoon in 1975, the light slanting through a high window, the air sharp with the smell of fallen leaves and wood smoke, that Father Daniel first spoke to me alone. "Sister Margaret," he said as I dusted, "the cruets," my hands trembling slightly, the cloths catching on the silver. "Does this life bring you peace?" His tone was gentle, curious, not judgmental, his green eyes steady as they met mine, like he could see the restlessness I tried to hide. I should have given the proper answer. "Yes, Father," but his gaze held me, like a hand reaching out across a chasm, and I faltered. "Sometimes it feels like a prison," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the creak of the floorboards, my heart pounding like a drum. I braced for a lecture, my breath shallow, but he nodded, his expression soft, a sadness flickering in his eyes. "The heart's a stubborn thing," he said, his voice low, almost a confession. "Even in God's house, it wants more." Those words cracked open a door in my soul, letting in a warmth I hadn't felt since I was a child, running through Mannheim's fields, the grass tickling my bare feet, the world full of possibility. Our conversations grew slowly, like wildflowers pushing through cracked earth, cautious but unstoppable. In the sacristy, among the garden's tomato vines and marigolds, their petals bright against the green, or by the well under the old maple tree, its leaves turning crimson in the autumn chill, we talked about safe things, the Phillies losing, streak, the crisp Lancaster air that carried the scent of apples and hay, the hymns we loved like "How Great Thou Art," its melody soaring through the chapel like a prayer set free. But there was a spark in his glances, a softness in his voice that set my heart racing like a Bruce Springsteen song on the radio. Born to Run, released that August, its raw energy echoing my own longing to break free. He told me about growing up in South Philly, grabbing cheesesteaks at Pat's with his cousins, the greasy wax paper crinkling in their hands, the tang of provolone sharp on their tongues, listening to Motown on his dad's old record player, the Supremes' voices filling their row house with dreams of love, running through alleyways, dodging street lights, the city alive with the hum of radios and the clatter of SEPTA buses. Shared memories of Mannheim, Mom's apple pie cooling on the kitchen counter, its cinnamon scent drifting through the house. Tommy's laugh as we raced bikes down Main Street, the pavement blurring beneath us, the wind tugging at my braid. My dream of teaching kids to read, their faces lighting up as they sounded out words in a little schoolhouse, chalk dust on my fingers. Each word felt like a rebellion, a step toward a line I knew I shouldn't cross, a sin I couldn't confess. I tried to pull back, to drown my thoughts in prayer, to focus on the rosary's rhythm, but I couldn't stay away. Daniel was a melody I couldn't stop humming, a signal breaking through the static of my vows, a light in the convent's endless gray. One evening in the spring of 1976, as we walked in the garden after compline, the sky streaked pink and gold over the Lancaster hills, the air cool and alive with the hum of crickets and the scent of blooming lilacs. He stopped under the maple tree, its leaves rustling softly, their shadows dancing on the grass. "Margaret," he said, dropping the sister for the first time, his voice low and trembling, like a note held too long. "You make me question everything I've promised." My breath caught, like I'd tripped on the convent stairs, my heart pounding so loud I thought the crickets would fall silent. I knew I should run, back to my cell, to my crucifix, to the safety of my vows. But my feet were rooted to the earth, the grass cool under my sandals. I looked into his green eyes and saw my own longing mirrored there, bright and dangerous, like a flame I couldn't resist. "I'm scared," I whispered, my voice barely a breath, the night air swallowing my words. He took my hand, his fingers warm and calloused, rough from years of helping his dad fix cars, and said, "Me too." Then he kissed me, soft at first, like a question, his lips tentative against mine, then with a hunger that answered my own, a fire that burned away the cold of the convent's walls. It was a sin, but in that moment it felt like the only truce I'd ever known, like a hymn sung just for us, its notes soaring beyond the iron fence, beyond the rules that bound us. We were careful, meeting in secret, late at night in the garden where fireflies danced like tiny stars, their glow fleeting but bright. In the sacristy's shadows after compline, the air thick with incense, the candles flickering like secrets. In the boiler room's hum, its pipes clanking as the convent slept, the heat wrapping us in a cocoon. He called me Maggie, and it felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd buried under my habit, a name from a life where I was a girl with dreams, not a nun bound by vows of chastity. We whispered dreams we knew were impossible, a little house in the Philly suburbs with a porch swing creaking in the breeze, a radio playing WMMR's rock anthems, Sunday drives to the Jersey shore, the salt air tangling our hair, the waves crashing like a promise, holding hands at a diner over milkshakes, chocolate syrup swirling in the glass, no one to judge us. I knew it was wrong. Every touch a betrayal of my vows, a sin I'd have to confess. but his arms were my escape from the convent's suffocating silence, like a radio finally tuned to the right station, the music clear and loud. I lived for those stolen moments, my prayers becoming rote, my thoughts consumed by him, his green eyes, his quiet laugh, the way his hand felt in mine, warm and steady against the cold of my doubts. But St. Agnes was a place of watchful eyes, when secrets didn't stay buried long. Sister Bernadette, with her nosy streak and sharp tongue, started trailing me, her footsteps crunching on the gravel paths, her shadow lingering near the garden gate, her presence a constant threat. I'd catch her watching me during Compline, her eyes glinting with suspicion, her lips pursed as if she'd already judged me guilty. Sister Agnes, with her knitting needles and stern glares, seemed to notice my flushed cheeks, my distracted prayers, her needles pausing when I passed, her sighs heavy with disapproval. Sister Clare, usually invisible, began hovering, her quiet presence unnerving, her eyes darting to mine then away, like she was collecting evidence. I grew paranoid, checking corners, lowering my voice to a whisper, my heart racing every time a floorboard creaked or a door clicked shut. One night, as Daniel and I parted in the sacristy's shadow, the moonlight casting long fingers across the pews, I dropped my scarf, a blue wool square I'd knitted myself, a small rebellion against the convent's black and white uniformity. I didn't notice it was gone until the next morning, when I saw Sister Bernadette clutching it in the refectory, her fingers tight around the fabric, her eyes locking with mine, a smirk curling her lips. My stomach twisted like a wrung-out rag, my palms sweaty, my breath shallow. She knew, and she'd been waiting for proof, a trophy to carry to Sister Teresa. The next day, Sister Teresa summoned me to her office, a stark room with a wooden desk, a crucifix looming on the wall, and a single window overlooking the garden's marigolds, their golden heads bowing in the breeze. "Sister Margaret," she said, her voice cold as a January frost, her gray eyes piercing like needles, "your behavior has been observed. You've been seen lingering where you shouldn't. Your prayers lack devotion. Your duties falter." She held up my blue scarf, its edges frayed, and my heart stopped. "This was found in the sacristy late at night, where you had no reason to be. What have you done?" Her words were a trap, each one tightening the noose, her tone daring me to lie. I denied everything, my voice shaking, my palms sweaty as if I were back in grade school, caught passing notes in class. "I've done nothing, Mother," I lied, but my cheeks burned, my eyes darting to the scarf, betraying me. Her eyes narrowed, glinting like steel. "God sees all," she said, her voice low and deliberate, "and so do I. Confess, or face the consequences." I left trembling, my habit clinging to my skin, promising myself I'd end things with Daniel, burn his memory like I should have, burn that note. But that night I met him again, in the garden under the maple tree, the stars bright overhead, the air cool against my flushed skin. His arms were the only place I felt whole, the only place the convent's walls didn't press in like a vice, the only place I could breathe. The betrayal came a week later during Compline, the chapel glowing with candlelight, the air heavy with the scent of wax and incense, the nuns' voices soft as they chanted the final prayers of the day. The doors burst open, slamming against the walls, and Sister Teresa stood there, her silhouette framed by the fading light, flanked by Sister Bernadette and Sister Clare, their faces hard with judgment, Sister Bernadette's smirk sharp as a blade. "Take them," Sister Teresa commanded, her voice echoing off the stained glass, sharp as a whip cracking. 2 nuns grabbed me, their fingers digging into my arms like claws, bruising my skin through the habit, pulling me from the pew. Daniel was dragged from the sacristy, where he'd been preparing for the next day's mass, his face pale but defiant, his green eyes locking with mine for a fleeting moment, a silent promise we couldn't keep. The other nuns gasped, their rosaries clattering, their prayers falling silent like a dropped hymn book, their eyes wide with shock or judgment or both. Sister Teresa's voice boomed. You have defiled this sacred place, brought shame to God's house. I was locked in a basement cell, a damp, windowless room with a sagging cot, a rusted bucket, and a faded crucifix staring down like a silent judge, its wood chipped from years of neglect. Daniel was taken away, whispers swirling that he'd be sent to a remote parish in Montana, stripped of his duties, maybe even defrocked. Some said he'd be exiled to a mission in the Rockies, others that he'd fled to Canada, others still that he'd fallen ill, his health broken by shame. I never saw him again. His face burned into my memory like a photograph I couldn't touch, his green eyes haunting my dreams. The interrogation lasted days, each one a blur of fear, shame, and Sister Teresa's relentless voice, her questions sharp as thorns. She demanded every detail, when it began, what we said, where we met, what we did in those stolen moments, under the stars, in the sacristy's shadows, in the boiler room's heat. I wept, begged for mercy, my knees aching from hours of forced prayer on the cold stone floor, my voice hoarse from reciting psalms as penance. But she was unyielding, her eyes cold as she scribbled notes, her pen scratching like an accusation. Sister Bernadette standing by her side, her smirk a poison that seeped into the room. You've betrayed God, Sister Teresa said, her voice cutting like a knife. You've brought shame to this convent, to every sister here. I was confined to the cell for weeks, given only bread and water, the crusts dry in my mouth, the water stale in the bucket. The other nuns shunned me, their eyes averted as if I carried a plague, their whispers sharp as thorns, harlot, sinner, fallen. Sister Joan, who'd once been kind, avoided me, though I saw her wipe tears once, her face hidden in her hands as she knelt in the chapel, her shoulders shaking. Sister Agnes prayed louder, her rosary beads clicking furiously as if to drown out my existence, her knitting needles flashing like tiny swords. Sister Clare, once invisible, now watched me with quiet disdain, her silence louder than words. I heard rumors about Daniel. Some said he'd been sent to a mission in the mountains, others that he'd vanished across the border, others that he'd taken ill, his spirit broken. The love that had felt like freedom, like a Springsteen song, soaring free, became a wound raw and unhealing, a melody I couldn't forget, a weight I carried with every step. Months later, in the winter of 1976, I faced the true cost of my sin. I was pregnant. I hid it as long as I could, wearing loose habits, skipping the communal showers, my heart pounding every time I caught my reflection in a window, the curve of my stomach undeniable under the black fabric. But my body betrayed me, the secret, too big to contain. Sister Bernadette noticed, her sharp eyes catching the swell of my stomach as I bent to weed the garden, the frost crunching under my boots, the cold biting my fingers. She reported me to Sister Teresa, her voice dripping with satisfaction, her smirk triumphant as she handed over my scarf, its blue wool a damning clue. One night, I was taken to the infirmary, a sterile room with a single bulb flickering overhead, a crucifix glaring down from the wall, its presence a silent accusation. A stern nurse, sworn to secrecy, delivered my child, a daughter with Daniel's green eyes and a soft cry that broke my heart like glass shattering on stone. I held her. For a moment, her tiny warmth against my chest, her fingers curling around mine, her breath a fragile miracle. I named her Grace in my heart, though I never spoke it aloud, a secret prayer for her future. Then she was taken, whisked away by the nurse, her cry fading down the hall. Sister Teresa told me she'd be given to a Catholic family in Pittsburgh, raised far from my shame, her life a blank page I'd never read. I screamed, begged, pounded the door, until my fists bruised, my voice raw, but it slammed shut, the lock clicking like a final judgment. I was alone, the echo of her cry haunting me, a ghost I'd carry forever, a loss that carved a hollow in my chest. I was allowed back to my duties, but I was a shadow among the nuns, a pariah in a place that preached forgiveness, but practiced judgment. They whispered about me, their words sharp as knives: disgrace, temptress, fallen woman. Sister Bernadette smirked when she passed, her eyes glinting with victory, her betrayal a wound that cut deeper than her words. Sister Agnes prayed, louder, her rosary beads clicking furiously as if to erase my presence, her knitting needles flashing like a warning. Sister Clare, once silent, now watched me with quiet disdain, her eyes cold, her silence a judgment. Only Sister Joan showed flickers of kindness. An extra biscuit slipped onto my plate at breakfast, its warmth a small comfort. A quick touch, on my arm in the garden, her fingers warm against my cold skin. A shared glance during compline, her hazel eyes soft with understanding. But even she kept her distance, afraid of Sister Teresa's wrath, her steps cautious when Sister Bernadette was near. I worked in silence, polishing pews until they shone like mirrors, the wood's grain smooth under my hands, weeding the garden until my hands blistered, the dirt caking under my nails, the marigolds drooping under the weight of winter, sewing altar cloths until my fingers bled, the needle pricking my skin like a penance, each stitch a reminder of my failure. The convent felt like a crypt, its brick walls closing in, the air heavy with the weight of my shame. I didn't regret loving Daniel, not truly, but I hated my weakness, my failure to fight for him, for our daughter, for the life we dreamed of by the sea. I wrote letters to him, pages of apologies, dreams and promises scrawled in the dim light of my cell, hidden under my mattress like the note I'd found by the well. I had no address, no way to know if he was alive, but writing kept him close, kept our love from fading into the convent silence, a fragile thread connecting me to a life that might have been. The years dragged on, slow as a funeral hymn, each one blending into the next, like the tolling of the chapel bell. The convent changed. Coal stoves gave way to electric heaters, their hum a constant drone in the dormitories. A TV appeared in the common room playing Jeopardy or Wheel of Fortune after supper, the nuns murmuring answers under their breath, their voices soft as they guessed at trivia. Sister Teresa grew frail, her iron grip weakening, her steps slower as she leaned on a cane, her gray eyes still sharp but clouded with age. Her shadow lingered, her disapproval etched into the walls, like graffiti, a reminder of her power. In 1983, a new nun, Sister Kathleen, arrived. A bubbly woman in her 30s who joined after a failed engagement to a filly cop. Her laughter like a breeze in the stale air. Her stories of city life, bars on South Street, Eagles games at the vet, stirring memories of a world I'd left behind. She was curious, asking questions about the convent's history, her eyes bright with interest, and I wondered if she'd heard whispers about me, the fallen nun, the one who loved a priest. I stayed silent, but her presence stirred old pain, like dust in a forgotten attic, memories settling heavily in my chest. I began to notice other secrets. A pack of Marlboros hidden behind a laundry basket, the smoke's faint scent lingering in the air. A Fleetwood Mac song, Landslide, hummed in the kitchen, its melancholy notes quickly silenced when Sister Agnes walked by. A love letter tucked into a hymnal, its edges worn, snatched away when I got too close, the nun's face flushing with guilt. The convent wasn't as holy as it seemed, its purity a facade, and that realization made my sin feel less heavy, though it didn't ease the ache in my heart, the longing for grace, for Daniel, for a life I'd lost. In 1990, Sister Teresa died, her funeral a somber affair. The chapel filled with the scent of lilies and the drone of prayers, the organ's notes heavy with finality. Sister Rose, a kinder woman with a soft voice and gentle eyes, became Mother Superior, bringing small freedoms, books from the Lancaster Library, novels by Anne Tyler or John Updike, their pages worn from eager hands, a radio for NPR or the occasional Eagles game, the announcer's voice crackling through the common room, stirring memories of Dad cheering in our living room. But I remained bound by my past, my heart heavy with regret, a stone I carried through every prayer, every chore, every silent night. I stayed, not out of faith, but because I had nowhere else to go, no family to return to, no life outside these walls, the world beyond the fence, a distant dream. I prayed for my daughter, imagining her life. Did she have Daniel's green eyes, his quiet strength, his gentle laugh? Did she know she was loved even from afar, by a mother who'd held her for only a moment? I dreamed of Daniel, his face as clear as the day we met, his voice calling me Maggie in the garden, the memory so vivid it hurt, like a wound pressed too hard. I wondered if he'd found peace, if he'd married, if he'd forgotten me, or if he too carried this pain like a scar, a mark no prayer could erase. In 1995, during a quiet moment in the garden, as Sister Joan and I tended the marigolds, their petals bright against the green, she spoke softly, her Georgia drawl thick with memory. "You ever wonder about that note you found years ago by the well?" she asked, her eyes fixed on the dirt, her hands trembling slightly. I froze, the memory of that scrawled paper flooding back, its words still sharp in my mind. "I wondered," I admitted, my voice low, afraid to break the moment. She sighed, her shoulders sagging, and confessed, "It was mine. I wrote it, back when I first came here, for a boy I loved in Savannah. I hid it, hoping to forget him, but I couldn't." Her eyes met mine, glistening with tears, and I saw a reflection of my own pain, a shared secret that bound us. It wasn't Daniel's note, but knowing its source, a young woman's heart, broken like mine, gave me a strange comfort, a reminder that I wasn't alone in my longing. I never told her about Daniel, about Grace, but her confession eased the mystery of that note, tying a loose thread in the tapestry of my regrets. In 2010, I found another note by the well, tucked behind the same loose brick in a different hand, its ink fresh. I still dream of you. It shook me, a reminder that secrets never die in a place like this, that the walls held more stories than mine, more hearts broken in silence. I burned it in the kitchen stove, the flames licking the paper, the smoke curling like a prayer, afraid of reopening old wounds, afraid of what other truths lay hidden. But it made me question how many others had loved in secret, their desires buried under vows. How many hearts had broken behind these bricks, their stories locked in the convent's silence. I began talking to Sister Joan more often, now older. Her Georgia drawl softer, her freckles faded, her smile tinged with sadness. We sat in the garden, the marigolds drooping, and she listened as I spoke of my past. Not all of it, but pieces, the weight of Daniel's memory, the ache of losing Grace. She admitted she'd once loved a boy in Savannah, a guitarist who played in juke joints, his fingers dancing over the strings like a prayer, his memory a wound she still carried. We all carry something, she said, squeezing my hand, her touch a small comfort, a flicker of light in the dark. Her words were a balm, but not enough to heal the wound, to fill the emptiness where Grace and Daniel should have been. In 2022, a journalist from the Philadelphia Inquirer came to St. Agnes, researching women in religious life for a feature on fading convents, their numbers dwindling as the world changed. I don't know why I spoke to her. Maybe I was tired of silence. Maybe I wanted my story to outlive me, to reach beyond these crumbling walls, to be heard in a world that had moved on without me. I sat with her in the chapel's back pew, the stained glass casting colors on my habit, red, blue, gold, like a memory of hope. I told her everything. Daniel, our love, our daughter, the betrayal, the loss, the scarf that undid us. I spoke for hours, my voice steady despite the tears, the memories flooding back like a river breaking its banks, the pain as raw as it was in 1976. She recorded it. Her recorder, a small black box on the pew, its red light blinking like a heartbeat, promising to protect my name, but I didn't care. I wanted someone to know, to carry my truth beyond these walls, to let it live in the world I'd left behind. Confessing didn't lift the weight, but it gave it shape, made it real, like a story finally told, a song finally sung, its notes carrying across the years. My daughter Grace is out there, in her late 40s now, maybe living a life I'll never know, a teacher, a mother, a woman with dreams of her own, her green eyes a mirror of Daniel's. I pray for her every night, picturing her face. Does she have his quiet laugh, his gentle strength, his way of seeing the world? Does she know she was born of love, even if it was forbidden, even if it cost everything? I don't know if Daniel's alive, if he forgave me, if he forgot me, or if he carries this pain too, a scar no time can fade. The convent is quieter now, with fewer nuns, the younger ones gone to cities or other callings, the red bricks crumbling, the garden overgrown with weeds, the well's stones mossy and worn. But these walls hold my story, my love, my loss, my regret. I betrayed my vows, but worse, I betrayed my heart. I loved Daniel, and I lost him, our daughter, and a piece of myself. This is my confession, spoken not just to God, but to you through Echoes of Real Lives, a channel that gave my story a voice, a chance to be remembered. If it touched you, please share your thoughts below. When did you start listening and what kept you here? Your words help stories like mine, stories of ordinary people with hidden truths, find light by liking, commenting, or subscribing to Echoes of Real Lives. You help bring these untold tales to the world, ensuring they're not forgotten. Thank you, and may your heart find peace wherever your story leads.